Hi there, this is David at TED-IELTS, and today I want to tell you why I think IELTS is such a difficult exam. I'm going to briefly give 6 reasons which are based upon my 13 years of experience training people to do this exam. Right, let's jump into it. First of all, IELTS is difficult because it's intended to be more authentic and comprehensive than other English tests. There isn't, for example, a vocabulary test or a grammar test that you can just pass by memorizing words or verb tenses. Instead, you have to answer difficult questions at length with a high degree of accuracy. In the speaking and writing sections, for example, you have to answer questions quite thoroughly with little preparation time, and everything you say is going to be judged, with your mistakes effectively lowering your score. Now, this of course makes it harder to fake English proficiency, which is why IELTS is so popular. But it can be frustrating for people because you really do need to have a high level of English in order to pass. Also, IELTS covers a massive range of topics, so it's not like you can just memorize sports vocabulary or business language, for example. You really need to be able to talk about an incredible array of things if you want to do well in this test. Next, IELTS is a high-level exam. Now, it isn't really advertised as such, and you certainly don't need to have a high level of English to take it. There's no entry exam or prerequisite qualifications for IELTS. However, if you don't have a very high level of English skill, then you'll probably struggle to even understand the questions. The exam is largely made for people who need to go to a foreign university, get a good job, or immigrate to a country like Canada or the UK. For these things, you naturally need to be very proficient in English, and so that's what the exam is designed around. It's really intended for those aiming at band 7 or higher. If you sit the exam and aim for band 6, you might find it a bit overwhelming, and you may be disappointed when your score is lower than you expected or you feel is fair. The next thing to consider is that IELTS isn't just testing your English skills. In fact, if a native speaker of the language took IELTS without learning anything about it first, they would probably struggle. Personally, I consider this to be a massive failure on the part of the people who design the exam. If a native speaker can't easily get a band 9, then obviously this isn't a very fair test. Part of the problem is that there are certain exam techniques and expectations that are fairly specific to IELTS. I can see why these have been incorporated into the test because they are a simplified version of academic skills or a codified version of general English, but it means that in order to do well at IELTS, you can't just have good English abilities. Instead, you need to know IELTS itself and learn IELTS exam techniques, which I think is sort of problematic. Another problem with IELTS is that the writing test is too hard. This is something that almost everyone knows, but it's never been dealt with by the exam organizers. I've had so many candidates come to me and say that they can easily get a band 9 in reading, speaking, and listening, but they can't get above band 6.5 in writing. Even when they do, it's damn near impossible to go beyond band 7. These people are doctors and lawyers who have lived in English-speaking countries for years. Their English is amazing, but they make tiny little errors in punctuation. These are the sorts of mistakes that a native speaker would make, but they prevent a candidate from getting a high score. This sort of issue ruins people's lives, and I think it's another big problem with this test. The next issue is that people approach IELTS with a really strange and problematic viewpoint. Now, I hate to stereotype, but this largely affects people from China and India, as well as some of the neighboring countries. The issue is that they think IELTS success depends on showing off certain so-called advanced skills, like using really obscure words or writing incredibly long sentences. This is obviously a terrible idea, but these people don't like to hear that. So they keep going with this method, always getting bad scores until finally they learn that they shouldn't cram random words into their essays. Instead, they should use proper English in a sensible way. If you use language accurately, you will get a high score. Despite what countless YouTubers and social media influencers tell you, there's no magical set of words that can guarantee you a band 8. If you don't believe me, just think about it for a moment. Imagine some foreign person came to you and spoke in your native language using completely random words plucked from a dictionary. Would you assume that they spoke your language perfectly, even though all these words were used wrongly? Of course not. Yet millions of people share this bizarre idea. Finally, and related to that last point, is the fact that IELTS and English training materials are often just terrible. The problem is that most IELTS tutors actually can't speak English and don't understand IELTS. It's just a lucrative business for them. Whenever I go on Twitter, Instagram, or YouTube, I'm horrified by what I see. These people are frauds and they gain thousands or millions of followers by spreading terrible advice. People really believe them when they say that they have some magic tricks or amazing vocabulary that will get them a high band score. Yet these people surely could not score above band 6 themselves. If you ever see an account on social media that says, "Don't use this word, use this one instead," then ignore or block them. If they just steal content from other pages or post random memes, then know that they're just trying to gain followers, not through their own knowledge, but through theft. These people are almost always fraudulent. Their advice is terrible and it will just slow your progress. Okay, I hope this has been helpful. It's important to understand the problems that people face with IELTS in order to avoid them and to speed up your learning process. It sometimes feels like IELTS success is impossible, but it's not. It just takes the right sort of efforts. If you consider what I've told you today, you can avoid certain traps and put yourself in a position for a better score in your next IELTS test.